Welcome to the Public Works Podcast, where we explore the people, ideas, and innovations shaping the future of infrastructure and public service. I'm your host for today's episode, Shane Silsby. In today's episode, we are featuring a conversation with Andy Boenau from the city of Richmond, who is a public servant that has been deeply involved in thinking about how cities function, especially in urban environments, how infrastructure decisions shape communities, and how we can have more thoughtful conversations about policies in those urban environments. In this episode, Andy shares his career journey into public service, what it's like working inside a city government, and some of the key challenges and opportunities facing not only the city of Richmond, but many urban areas across the country. We also talk about his work with Urbanism Speakeasy, an initiative focused on creating space for deeper conversations about cities, and why podcasting and open dialogue can be powerful tools for communicating complex civic issues. We also dive into an important topic for anyone working in government: how to ask hard questions and push for better outcomes while still operating within a public agency. It's a thoughtful conversation about urbanism, public service, communication, and the evolving role of public works professionals in shaping better cities. So with that, let's get into the conversation. Here's my interview with Andy Boenau from the city of Richmond. Thanks. Welcome to another episode of the Public Works Podcast, where we explore the people, projects, and ideas shaping the future of infrastructure and public service. I'm your host, Shane Silsby, and today we have a very special guest joining us, Andy Boenau from the city of Richmond, Virginia. It's someone who has been thinking deeply about cities, public infrastructure, urbanism, all those things, the role of conversation helping shaping better communities, and somebody that I've now wanted to meet or felt like I should have met by now because of all the things he's doing in the industry. He's worked at the intersection of public service, communication, of ideas in this industry, and his involvement with Urbanism Speakeasy is something we'll dive into as well. That's creating space for conversations about how cities function. Mr. Boenau also has experience using podcasting and dialogue as tools for engaging people around complex civic issues. And we all know that video medium is the number one way people are communicating today. So, Andy, thank you so much for being on the show, and welcome to the Public Works Podcast.
Shane, thanks for having me. Clearly, I need to get you to be my hype man and write bios for me. That's a good collection.
Well, it's easy when you do the work, and then we just talk about the work, right?
The only thing missing, my dad would say, is that I was born at a very young age. But other than that, I think you captured everything.
I hadn't heard that one before, but that's an interesting one. I have to put that in. But we're able to hype you because of your journey, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. If we could start with your career journey and what originally drew you into public service, and then working with cities, and now working for a city.
You're opening me up for that recent GIF and meme. It's all about the journey, not the destination. Is that what this is?
Sure, yeah. Well, we need to know the journey so we understand how we got to the destination.
Yeah, we'll know the destination, and I guess when things are better, because things get better in the end. And if it's not all the way better, then we're not at the end. Let's say it's a potential for me to get extremely long-winded with a question like that, because one of my soapboxes is the not just guardrails we put on career journeys in modern culture, but just often walls or other kinds of obstacles. And there's so much for those of us that end up in some kind of engineering or town planning or landscape architecture, these kinds of things that have to do with the built environment. So much of it is about conformity and rewarding conformity, which is, broadly speaking, what modern education system does. And in some ways that leads to good things. Like, there are certain things that should be status quo. They should be very normal. I appreciate that most people chew with their mouth shut. I do like that. I conform to that social thing also. But when it comes to the work we do as individuals, it's so rare that we're given an opportunity, let alone encouraged as individuals, to find types of work that we enjoy doing, and intersecting that with, there's a market for it out there, like somebody will pay for that kind of thing, and it's fulfilling in some kind of way. So that can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people. I knew as a teenager, the last thing I was going to do was copy my dad's career, because why on earth would I, as a teenage boy, want to just copy my dad? Like probably most other Gen Xers had punk rock DNA. I was not interested in the man, whether that's the government man or my dad, the man. He worked for the federal government for many years for the Federal Transit Administration. Here I am all these years later with a Venn diagram of network contacts that strongly overlaps his, being in the transportation industry. But the path didn't come because I was thinking ahead to, I want to be a transportation engineer or a city planner or a town planner. It was more like as a kid, when you're getting the pressure question from grown-ups to say, well, what do you want to do when you grow up? Well, I don't know. I want to run my mouth. Can I tell jokes? Can I make people laugh? Can that be a job? No, that can't be a job. So it's the old thing about the career pillars. You can be a doctor, you can be a lawyer, you can be an engineer, you can be an astronaut. And be like, can I be a trash man? I want to be a trash man. They get to ride on the back of the truck. I guess maybe you could be a trash man, would be the feedback I would get. I didn't have this strong desire to follow a certain career path and a hierarchy. The older I got, even through high school years and into college, sometimes it was just path of least resistance, frankly. When I ended up in an engineering environment, I was learning about things in school I thought were going to kill me, like physics and wood structures and steel structures and all this kind of intense civil engineering curriculum that some of my friends loved and were doing great at. And I was just trying to get out of there. I enjoyed the socializing. The favorite parts of college to me were the same as elementary school. It was lunch and recess. The classes were just things that were in between. And what ended up happening going through this program, I tell people that my parents helped me buy a civil engineering degree, but I never actually engineered anything. In my first several years, I knew I needed to get out of college. You got to pay bills. Parents are only going to let you mooch for so long. So have to pay for gas to get around. I grew up in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., and so you're stuck in a car if you're anywhere in that environment. So I got to pay for gas. I'm going to have to pay for food. Eventually getting married, to get to pay for more things. And the necessity of just work is staring you in the face. I was at an internship thanks to my dad giving me a long list of printed out contacts that he had in the consulting world. And he just said, here's 3 pages of people and their addresses and phone numbers. See if you can get an internship. And so I called a bunch of people, did some interviews, got an internship, and then ended up getting hired by one of those firms. And in my first summer, they rotated me through a couple of weeks at a time through different basically options at the firm. So 2 weeks learning about road design and AutoCAD, and a couple of weeks learning about environmental planning and the NEPA process, and a couple of weeks learning about structures. The last cycle for me was traffic engineering. And DC metro area is like Southern California, where you are, is always making the news in annual lists of worst places for traffic. I was very familiar with traffic. And so I thought, well, that's where I'll start. I'll get going in traffic engineering. I liked it. I'm a people watcher, people person. And when I got told, hey, here's what we're doing, we'll go count cars. We got to sit in a lawn chair and count cars for 2 hours. And then we're going to come back at lunchtime and do the same thing again, and come back in the afternoon and do the same thing again. And that was boring, but also you get to hang out with people. So again, I'm like, is this recess or is this work? I'm not actually sure what I'm getting paid to do. But over the years, or even in those first couple of years, learning new things about how we did analysis, since I didn't think of transportation engineering as a career, it was just the first thing. I just asked lots of dumb questions about everything, mostly self-preservation, so that my boss wouldn't have to do everything for me. So I'm taught how to use the software tool to analyze an intersection. I'd ask questions, everything about it. All right, the default setting is a lane is 12 feet wide, but it has a little up-down arrow. It lets me go down to 8.5 feet. Am I allowed to make it 8.5 feet? No. Why not? Do I make it 10? No. Why not? Well, it has to be at least 12. And then, well, why is that? Well, that's the way we do it. Okay, that's just the way we do it. Again, like my core is not one to sit well with those kinds of things. The authority just telling me, just do it because this is the way we've done it. Or analyzing an intersection as it's got stop signs today, but we want to consider a traffic light. All right. Well, there's this other checkbox. If I click this box, it says analyze as a roundabout. Do we ever do that? And the response I got was, what are we, France? No, of course we don't analyze roundabouts. Okay, I'm just the dummy laughing nervously, like, why don't we analyze roundabouts? Well, just because we don't. That's not what we do. And that kind of response, I got just so many questions. And it wasn't just that supervisors were exasperated by the kid asking dumb questions. I'm their employee at this point, a junior engineer learning the ropes. And it was just, this is the way we do it, so that I, as the next generation, would continue that practice of, here's your default settings, stay with these default settings, don't question the default settings. That I thought was really interesting. I didn't study anything about city planning or highways through cities when I was in college. It was civil engineering. So it was just very earthy how my career shifted around inside of transportation and planning was just coming out of asking lots of dumb questions, because I don't like just being told, just do this just because this is the way we do it. In the end, the answer might be that we do this for very good reasons and we'll keep doing it. Like, it's probably a good idea if you're on a highway that people going in one direction don't mix up with people going the other direction. You probably want to separate them. So that's probably a very good status quo kind of thing. But then you get these other kind of default settings like 12-foot wide lanes and extra turning lanes in a downtown environment, and squeezing the walking environment if there's any space left to the edges. And it turns out maybe that's actually not a good default setting for people. So these kinds of things, I learned them on the job by asking questions, not being content with rules for the sake of rules.
Yeah, interesting. So a couple things there. One, you didn't like what we call Nike authority, right? Nike, just do it. Also about the engineering pathway, I find that regardless of what you do, it makes you a professional problem solver. So you're able to take that background and doing those difficult things and now solve problems or challenges that you're seeing as you go through your career journey. That's interesting that you started challenging early, or questioning, I should say, in areas now that we think of maybe as commonplace questions to ask, especially in urban environments, lower speed, where if you take the gloves off, Astro Manual or METC or whatever, and you say, hey, we're low speeds, right? A lot of stuff can go on here. We don't need this huge taper or whatever, these white lanes. You might have been a little bit ahead of those conversations when you were early in your career.
What I learned, I don't even know that I was ahead. And I think it's just ahead of some, perhaps, because this goes back to the whole issue of schooling. Like, in general, schooling is about conformity. So if the vast majority of people have been trained for 12, 16, 18 years to conform and then rewarded for it, then naturally there's going to be a lot of suspicion for outliers. And then it's rewarded in our industry, whether you're in a consulting practice or you work for a government agency. Generally speaking, if you work as a professional planner or as an engineer, a civil engineer, you're not going to be kicked out by doing the same old thing, but you might be kicked out for taking a chance. You might be kicked out for taking a stand on, say, a speed management project, doing something like design speed being the same as the operating speed. So meaning if a street should function at 25 miles an hour, designing it for 25 miles an hour rather than 35. And then air quotes saying, that's just to be safe. If you just go along with what's normal, that's a safe career bet. So I understand why many people aren't that interested in pushing back. So maybe some of that had to do with at the start and in my early years, I didn't have in my mind a map of what my career should look like. If I can't make people laugh, fine. Then by the time I got to like middle school, then it was, well, I want to be a drummer in a rock band. And then high school years, even more so. Like, do I even need to go to college? Like, can I just be on stage playing drums with a rock band? Like, that's okay, that sounds good. Let's just do that. Since I had that looseness, then it didn't bother me to ask these kinds of questions. But then when I started finding, like, searching for stuff on the internet, especially in the early 2000s and leading up to 2010, I was finding there were an awful lot of people who had been asking these kinds of questions and then lecturing and wagging their fingers about these things for decades, and many of whom came from outside of engineering and planning. And so maybe Jane Jacobs is the most famous in the United States, coming at this from a position of a journalist or just somebody interested in people, kind of an anthropologist, and then writing these scathing reviews about land use planning and how zoning was destroying places and how streets were ripping things up if the focus was on pumping as much car traffic as possible at high speeds. So I was seeing other people who have been doing these things, and they have really strong arguments. They have strong arguments from a human-centered point of view, not this abstract save the planet kind of view, but these people are looking at things at the human level. What do we as human beings need? What's good for us? What's good for our mental health, our physical health? What keeps communities strong? What makes a nice neighborhood? What makes a place that you want to hang out? You want to spend your money, you want to linger, you want to open a business, you want to eat. All these things, those things were the core of what these anti-establishment folks were writing and talking about for decades. In finding out these old timers, then I accidentally happened upon New Urbanism, or the Congress for New Urbanism, and that blew my mind. So I went in 2010, I think was the first time that I actually attended one of their conferences, and I was exhausted after being, I don't remember if it was 4 full days of being surrounded by architects and designers and developers and some engineers and some planners, some city administrative or town planner types, but all arguing about ideas and fighting it with ideas, like iron sharpens iron, that sort of thing, but not at each other. There were Socratic circles talking about urbanism kind of stuff, like how we build stuff and how we could build it better for human beings. And that was so incredible and so encouraging to see, oh, I'm not alone at all. There are hundreds of people, and that's just hundreds of people at this one event. And then getting to know some of those individuals, several of whom I've stayed in touch with over the years and still good friends with, that was really rewarding.
That sounds interesting. A couple of observations there. One is you mentioned Jane Jacobs. That's what I'm looking at my bookshelf, The Death and Life of Great American Cities, I think it is. An interesting book countering the Robert Moses principles of the car must succeed. So I think that's interesting. Also, you're probably engaged, you talked about Congress for New Urbanism, but probably NACTO is one of your areas that you work in, because I know I've been working with them in the past. They're all about trying to use more context sensitive, not just speed limits. So probably those same people in those circles as well.
Yeah, and that's something I remind people of who are like, I consider myself an advocate who just happens to be in this position. And I remind fellow advocates, there are a lot of other people out there doing good work. You might not see them, you might be facing this direction in your community, but there are people a few neighborhoods over facing a different direction, and they're doing the same thing. They're rallying a base in the same kind of way that you are. So yeah, NACTO, the National Association of City Transportation Officials, is an excellent group that sort of helps knit together cities and transit agencies around the country who do have at their core, like, we want to crack this human flourishing nut. We want to make places, transportation systems that are good for people. And because it has this specific focus on transportation, the membership can go really deep and specific about mobility, which is really good.
Yeah, that's always good to highlight those efforts. The other takeaway I had from what you said was engineers being rewarded for conformity, but our infrastructure cousins, the architects, are rewarded for the opposite, and always being unique. And the architects that do unique things all the time, they get rewarded in that direction. So it's interesting. Our infrastructure cousins have a different reward scheme, it seems like. All those things you said, your great work, that's what probably makes you an asset for the city of Richmond. I haven't spent a lot of time in Richmond, so I thought maybe you could just tell us, for our listeners, what makes Richmond an interesting place, if you want to give us a quick overview of the city, and what are some unique things that people might not know about the city or that area?
If you have not been to Richmond, Virginia is about to be your favorite place in the US. So come visit. It's Mid-Atlantic City, so I'm biased for lots of reasons. One, I live here. I've lived here for 20 years, but I'm a Mid-Atlantic snob. I'll admit that. As much as I do appreciate the weather of Southern California, Richmond is a river city, about 230,000 people. Since we're on the East Coast, the Mid-Atlantic, we're of course old by American standards, which means from a transportation point of view, we've got a great grid. We've got a great set of bones in town planner speak. The things that people rave about Richmond, if you Google us, you'll find over the last 5 years especially, magazines of all types best place for this, best place for that. We're known for food, we're known for art, we're known for tattoos, we're known for outdoor living, like because of the river and rapids right through the downtown. That's a huge draw. We've got a great pedestrian bridge that goes right over some of the rapids in the James River. There's a lot to love about Richmond. This sounds cliche from an almost real estate point of view, but it's a big enough city that it has lots of fun stuff to do. We've got universities, we've got museums, we've got all these kinds of attractions, but it's not so big that you get lost. It's big enough to have neighborhoods with distinct character, but not so big that you think, wow, I can't get across town tonight. You can always get across town. So it's a fantastic place. I'll be loving it even more in the years to come because we will eventually be a world-class city for people that want to ride bikes to get around. And with the explosion of e-bikes, especially in the North American market, that's going to be something that I think will transform how people get around and make our somewhat hilly city feel flat to everyone.
Yeah, that's an interesting shift happening in the transportation industry. We deal with that a lot in Southern California from a safety and regulatory standpoint for our e-bike users under 16, trying to figure, they don't know the rules of the road, all those things. That's a whole separate show on e-bikes. I'm sure we'll look forward to your book or presentation on that in the future. But obviously you're dealing with a city that's big enough to have a lot of interesting things going on, as you said, neighborhoods, looking forward to the future, but you're probably trying to balance community expectations, budget constraints like everybody else, political realities, long-term infrastructure needs, or trying to shift the way the infrastructure looks. So how do you approach navigating all those issues in your role in trying to be a leader in the city to deal with these future issues?
Yeah, so one thing, having spent more than 25 years as a consultant and freelancer, I had a different view then than I do now working for a city in expectations. Probably the first jaw-dropping and I think funny thing about, it makes sense, but still funny thing about city government is so many people want to treat City Hall like a vending machine. They want to order something and it hasn't come out of the machine yet. They slam that button a couple more times, they start shaking the machine. Like, I ordered my such and such. I ordered a stop sign, I ordered a signal, I ordered a whatever. I ordered my street to get swept. That's an interesting thing. So there's definitely just that human nature need for somebody to take care of me. There's definitely that. The city just in January of this year created its first ever Department of Transportation within Public Works. And I get to be in the hot seat for that. I get to be the director, which has been a blast. And the reason why I know it's going to be so much fun and why I can see clear paths even through conflicting requests from residents about I need this, I need that. From a transportation point of view, our North Star is Vision Zero and complete streets. And these two things are interrelated. So Vision Zero is the international movement, but this concept that no severe crash is acceptable. Everyone should be able to move around and then get where they're going alive. You shouldn't have to end up in the hospital or the morgue just from moving around. Vision Zero is the effort to completely eliminate life-changing crashes. Complete streets is our jargon for a transportation system that accommodates everybody, all ages and all abilities in whatever mode. Cars aren't going anywhere, so this is not an anti-car position. This is a pro-options position. We want people to have extraordinary liberty to move around. The freedom to walk, the freedom to ride a bike, the freedom to hop on the bus, the freedom to drive their car. But when you put these two things together, our North Star then is design, maintain a transportation system that is safe for everyone, all ages, all abilities, and all modes. So because that's the North Star, then there are some things that have to be put aside. Like, that's a petty complaint. We'll deal with that, but it's not the urgent thing. Here's the thing that's very important. So just sifting through requests and priorities, there's still a lot of details that are worth debate. Where exactly do the bike lanes go? How exactly do you treat one corner versus another if you're daylight intersection? Again, we're an old city, so we're going to be constrained in a way that the sprawling suburbs are not constrained with space. There will always be debate around design details, but from a philosophical point of view, we're starting from a place of how do we protect the human being? How do we give people the most freedom that they can possibly have to get around our city? To me, that's the way of setting everything. Then if residents in Richmond hear that and understand that, then the conversations and disagreements around things are a lot easier to have. You're generally speaking not going to have long-term hurt feelings because you understand what the city's priorities are and that there are only so many resources. There's only so much staff resource. There's only so much money and so on. So if you have to start with these priorities, everything else comes into focus. So like for us, this is common among cities that have a Vision Zero statement or a goal that are trying to eliminate severe crashes. For us, we have what we call the high injury network that's only about 9% of our streets, where about 75% of the severe crashes happen. We know we have to have an intense focus on that 9% of streets. Not to say that other things aren't happening, because at the same time, we've got 400 speed tables that have gone in to slow people down on streets throughout the city. We've got lots of other pedestrian safety and traffic calming measures going in citywide, but we have to focus on that 9%. If we can get rid of the terrible things happening on that 9%, then we have the time and bandwidth to worry about every loose brick on a sidewalk or every cracked bit of concrete. I think having Vision Zero and complete streets as the starting point helps go through these expectations.
Interesting. So you're starting with why, right? Trying to get people educated on the why. And then you're triaging, right? You're triaging all your issues and trying to deal with the big boulders first and then deal with the sand later. And hopefully people will understand that investment strategy, right? Or energy strategy.
Yeah. And it's an old saying, but some people have taken out, like there's even a book by this title, but focus on the problem, not the solution. I want to direct other people to focus on the problem. So you, my fellow resident, don't have to be an expert in drainage. So you don't have to understand exactly what's going on after a snowstorm at that one corner that's getting backed up. Tell me the problem, or tell your city the problem, and then they will identify what could be going on and then come up with some solutions, rather than that vending machine approach of, hey, I know what I need. I just need one more stop sign, or I just need one more speed limit sign, or I just need one more such and such. Focus on the problem, and then we'll help figure out the solutions.
Right, because some people just say, give me what I want, and you want to give them what they need, right? Which are two different things.
A lot of parenting going on.
Well, it comes down to the role of government is to do for the people what they can't do for themselves, but it's not to do for the person what they can't take some responsibility or some leadership or education role to try to understand the bigger context, to inform their ask or work with their neighbor or change their like the way that they operate and the infrastructure is trying to help everybody. So you're doing a great job, I'm sure, communicating all those things and being a leader in the area. But also, I wanted to talk to you about the Urbanism Speakeasy efforts that you're doing. And I think that's really interesting and a nice title too, by the way. And for those who haven't heard of that effort or that initiative, what is Urban Speakeasy and how did you get that started, or how did that come to be in your orbit?
So I started that with some friends at Congress for New Urbanism. It's just something that I made, but I made it after one of our happy hours. Several of us were talking about how few podcasts there were at the time. This was 2010, 2011, that were focused on the built environment. This wasn't just transportation people. This was developers, planners. It was a mix of people, but all who had this idea of human scale design being the best possible outcome. And then mixed in with that, those conversations about there just aren't any podcasts about this was also my constant gripe about how we I don't know, what word should I make up, technify things. We, especially engineers, I think, I mean, maybe planners do this too, but definitely engineers, we are expected to use the most technical language possible for everything. I was ranting at a coworker about this, not at him, but about this issue just this week, that university programs teach technical writing. They teach a form of speaking that is so counter to how human beings speak and write. We're trained in a way that's setting us up for failure, so that by the time we get out into the real world and we write something that we've done, or we talk about something that we're doing as a professional engineer, it comes out sounding like another language to the average person. You can be 100% accurate and truthful in your message, but when it comes out with all this jargon that you take for granted because you know the terms, and then you're trying to, especially when you write it, trying to cram in all the synonyms that might also sound good. And then you remember your college teacher in technical writing class going, and remember to add adverbs, like adverbs are good. And you start seeing the LYs everywhere. It comes out as just a mess and frankly boring. And so I wanted to have a podcast that was talking about human scale design. I got super inspired by Jane Jacobs and especially her rowdy spirit, but then also just without the jargon. So I started it just as an interview show where I would interview people that I thought were interesting and I thought were doing exciting work. And it could be as simple as a person that was subversively putting in gardens throughout their town. One guy got arrested because he was planting tomatoes on that grassy strip by a sidewalk. And then some other people were very prominent in the industry that I was interviewing. It was a mixture. It was just things that people I thought were interesting, dealing with the built environment in some way, but who shared this idea that we should be able to have nice neighborhoods. Like, we should be able to have nice things. Then over the years, I got so busy doing other things, I had to put pause on the actual interview-based podcast, but I kept the name and then just started writing more and more. And then now I keep that, the writing will never stop. And at some point I'll bring back the audio podcast because I can't get enough of podcasting. I think it's such a great, especially the audio form as we talk on video, but I think podcasting is so great because especially on topics like this that are nonfiction, somebody can do, they can grocery shop, they can be vacuuming the house, they can be doing chores, they can be riding their bike to work with an earbud in, they can do these other things and listen to a podcast. When it's a nonfiction kind of content, I think it's a lot easier. Maybe I'm projecting because these are things that I'll do that it's easier for me to absorb. In the end, both for me as an individual, but then also City of Richmond, our Department of Transportation, I want culture change. As many people, like whether it's 10 people or thousands of people, any number of people that I can help communicate these things to and then help spark something in someone, but then they become an agent of culture change, then that's fantastic. I know that that's happened over time, but I can never imagine stopping doing that kind of work.
That's great. I'm sure the industry will be better for it, having you out there making headway. And I was going to ask you a little bit about podcasting, but you talked about that. You're going to get back into that. We appreciate that. Any advice for us on the Public Works podcast? You were a few years ahead of us. Anything you want to tell us we should
keep going? Never stop.
Never stop.
The guy who stopped his podcast, also I paused. The guy who paused his podcast says never stop. I think it's so important. I think it's so important for this kind of content. I know my fellow planners and engineers don't want to be stereotypes, but here I go again. It's an industry that, again, I think this has a lot to do with the conformity, culturally being trained to be comfortable with just doing what everybody else does. And then being afraid about being the only one or the first one, or even just perceived as the first to do a thing. There were people when I first started the Urbanism Speakeasy podcast, they're like, well, what are your coworkers going to think? What is your clients going to think? Like, well, they should be delighted because I'm talking about things I'm learning about the industry as I go. If we're thinking in terms of what's already been done, what's safe, then we're not really helping people. The more people like you that are putting out content, even if it's interviewing others and getting people to relax and talk more and just talk about what they do, even if it's just in a professional development kind of thing where you share this interview with a high school kid who's not sure what they want to do, that sort of thing can be so valuable. And so if it's an interview type program like you have, just getting people to talk, getting planners and engineers to talk about the nature of their work and get them to loosen up, it's good for everybody. It's good for the people that eventually hear it, but then it's also good for the professionals that are willing to sit and talk. Get over the initial fear factor of being on a hot mic or being on a camera and just relax. Don't worry about the jargon. Don't worry about all the technical writing that college professor told you about all those years ago. And just in plain language, describe what it is you do and the outcomes you're hoping for. Yeah, I think the more people that would start doing whatever's easy, or whatever form of communication is easy for you, if that's writing, write. If that's talking, then talk. If it's making videos, make videos. Whatever the thing is, just work on it.
Good advice. And can do a couple of things from a workforce development standpoint, workforce generation standpoint. We need more people in the industry, right? And so it starts at the high school or college levels. And then also potentially developing some empathy, maybe for those that are not in the industry or government. Why is this thing that way? Maybe they can learn some more about that. What's interesting about what you're doing also, and maybe this is a lesson for others, and I was 20 years in local governments in 3 states, and it was always a balance on messaging and how you can ask hard questions when you're in public service, because you have a position, you have a role, but you're also, even though you're not an elected official, you're an official and representing an area, but then you also want to share your maybe professional views that are intended to be positive, but there's just a balance there, right? That's why we have PIOs and strategic communications people in government. So how do you do that? How do you balance that with maybe offering some interesting perspectives or constructive critique while you're in local government? Because I think a lot of people across the country would struggle with that.
Yeah, it's true. It's hard for people to swallow. Let's say you're a transportation person. So you might be a member of the Institute of Transportation Engineers, or if you're a planner, you might be a member of American Planning Association. These groups expect you to be an advocate. They have subcommittees on advocacy. So you can be a certified planner, you can be a licensed engineer, and not only can you be an advocate, you're expected to be an advocate. If your code of ethics includes things like serve the public interest, then, for example, from a transportation point of view, I know that saving lives serves public interest. It does not always serve the public opinion, which is an interesting conflict. I find it interesting that public interest and public opinion are often quite a clash. One common example of that is that in everywhere USA, the fights over a road diet. You've got a 4-lane street, 2 lanes in each direction, and there's a proposal to rearrange the street space so that there will be one general purpose lane in each direction, and then the rest of the space will be used in a different way. It might be used for bike lanes, it might be used for dedicated bus lanes, but it's going to be used in a different way to do 2 things. Back to that Vision Zero Complete Streets North Star, it's going to be used to save lives by reducing car speed, and it's going to increase people's options for the ways they get around, whether it's walking or riding bikes or taking the bus. If you're ready to start at those points of my mission is Vision Zero and Complete Streets, then someone can come at you hard and say, can't believe you would advocate for taking away a car lane in each direction. How dare you, as a government official, take something away from me? As a professional, you've got to, this takes time for some, it takes time for anybody to be able to receive that criticism and then be able to articulate back, I'm not taking away car space. I'm providing freedom. I'm increasing your liberty by giving you more ways to get around. And I'm protecting lives by managing speeds, because as it's designed right now, it's designed like a drag strip. This is not serving the public interest. It turns out that I and my team as professional engineers, we know some things about how to calm speeds. We know some things about how to rearrange street space to make it better for human beings. So if that's our charge, then it can be a fortress. You can use that sort of thing as both justification or an excuse. If you're the type of person that feels sheepish, and if someone's attacking you and you don't like the feeling of being attacked, you can shrug and be like, well, I've got no choice but to follow this Vision Zero thing. I'm supposed to save lives, so don't be mad at me. I have to save lives. So you can blame Vision Zero for these kinds of things. But I think when you're willing to take a stand on those very clear principles, then these other things, they don't feel like such big fights anymore.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially with those road diets. You're increasing safety by reducing the accident types too, left turn, head-ons, all those things. I remember a project I had like 20 years ago. There was a big debate. There was businesses and everything, a 4-lane to a 3-lane conversion, and you're going to kill our business and you're going to hurt traffic. The road carried about 12,000 vehicles a day. So you got 4 lanes, that's 40,000, right? A 3-lane section with a 2-way left turn lane is about 25,000. So I knew the capacity was going to work fine. But it's one of those things where it's a trust issue sometimes. It's a fear issue of the unknown. You get it done, works fine. And I think the challenge for government agencies is rarely does that opposition come back and say, yeah, Andy, you got that one right. Good on you. They just go about their day.
Right.
That's part
And
of
I
the
would,
challenge of government, right? You just got to try to do the right thing no matter what, right?
going back to what we were talking about before about different types of communications, this is why I would go back to the importance of forming habits of articulating ideas. The more you write, the better thinker you become. The more you talk about these things, the better thinker you become. When you ask questions, you're intellectually curious about things. You're trying to figure out, but really, why did they do this thing? It makes you so much better at your work. And then when you get that kind of foundation, or in marketing terms, your content library of things, like here are my technical things that I do in plain language. Then when you have a public information officer or a communications team whose their responsibility might be to be pushing out information or to put out flyers or that sort of thing, you as the subject matter expert can share information with them in a way that's already palatable and they can understand it much better, so that it's much more likely that the public then will receive information in a way that makes sense. This is something that we're doing in Richmond. We've got within the Department of Transportation our own community engagement division. And this is in addition to having public information officers and your standard kind of outbound communications types. And that's because we know transportation is so important. It's under everything we do. And year round, not just one project at a time, but year round, we want to be able to talk with people both digitally, podcasts, and also in person at events about why we do the things we do and what we're doing. So that 6 months from now, the average Richmonder, I would hope, would know what daylighting is. They might not call it daylighting, but they're going to know what it is. They're not just going to be annoyed at something like a speed hump. They're going to understand why it's there. And same thing with all these other kind of technical things that we're doing. Something technical like leading pedestrian interval, where people walking get a head start before cars get a green light. Richmonders are going to know all about that. It's a lot easier for us to get that kind of thing out to people. We might as well call it the trust building division. It's the old joke, if a tree falls in the wood and nobody's there to hear it, does it make a sound? Well, if you do great work and nobody knows about it, they act like nothing's been happening. We've got to be able to talk about these things year round and communicate in a language that people understand.
Trust, a huge thing across the country at all levels of government right now, right? That's a thing we need to worry about. Trust me, I could talk with you all day, Andy. There's no question about that, but I know you're busy. You have a lot going on at the city. So as we wrap up here, I wanted to say it's been great. I wish I met you earlier, and I hope to chat with you again at one of the conferences or when I'm in DC area or something like that. But before we wrap, do you want to tell listeners where they might be able to learn more about what's going on at the city of Richmond or your department, and then where they can find out about Urbanism Speakeasy, or where they might be able to connect with you in the future?
Yeah, I'll leave you with three things. I know you also sometimes give book recommendations, so I'll start with that. If there's a book that I could push in front of every planner and engineer that's dealing with the built environment, especially, a book called Alchemy by Rory Sutherland. And the subtitle is The Surprising Power of Ideas That Don't Make Sense. Any title like that, I'm drawn to, but it's such a good book. Can't get enough of this. Alchemy. Urbanism Speakeasy, you can find that at urbanismspeakeasy.com. That's where I run in my mouth about all the things that we've been talking about for the last hour or so. And then finally, City of Richmond, I would encourage folks, and this gets to the communication side, we have a brand new Twitter account, or X, RVA_DOT. So follow us there. We are about to launch an Instagram. So if you are Instagram, then same tag, RVA_DOT, and you're going to get to see us practice what we preach about communication and doing our best to speak in a plain language that Richmonders can understand about our quest for reaching Vision Zero and complete streets.
It's a great mission. Andy Boenau, City of Richmond, thank you so much for joining us on the Public Works Podcast, and thanks for everyone listening in at home. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, share it with a colleague, and stay tuned for more conversations with industry leaders trying to shape the future of public infrastructure like Andy's doing in Virginia. Until next time, I've been your host, Shane Silsby, and this has been the Public Works Podcast. Thank you very much.
So that was Andy Boenau from the City of Richmond. Thanks to Andy for joining us and sharing his perspective on cities, public service, and the importance of thoughtful dialogue around urban issues. We really appreciate talking with him and for his time being on the show. And thanks to everyone listening to this episode of the Public Works Podcast. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and share it with a colleague who's interested in the future of infrastructure, urban planning, and public service. We'll also include links in the show notes where you can learn more about the City of Richmond, Andy's work, Andy's favorite book, and Urbanism Speakeasy. For the Public Works Podcast, our goal is to highlight the leaders, practitioners, and ideas shaping the future of public infrastructure and the communities we serve. Thanks for listening. See you on the next episode of the Public Works Podcast. All right. Here we are.
Joseph here, Public Works Podcast.
Shane here as well.
All right, so you just watched some cool content. All we need from you is to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. It helps us get the message out. It helps us propagate the gospel of public works. So if you have free time, which you probably have 2 or 3 seconds, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button so more people can follow us.
That's right. All we're trying to do is highlight the public works industry.
That's it.
Make those professionals trying to improve your communities look good and raise awareness and credibility of public works.
Yes.
It's easy to do.
Once again, thanks for watching. If you have any content ideas, if you have any questions, please put them in the comments, and Shane or I will answer them within a week of you putting it in there, and we'll get you the answer that you need.
Thank you very much.